Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Beyond the Crucible. I'm Gary Schneeberger, the co-host of the show and the communications director for Crucible Leadership. And you've clicked play on. We hope mightily that you have clicked subscribe to a podcast that deals in crucible experiences. Now, that term may not be all that familiar to you if you're just joining us for maybe the first time. Hopefully it's very familiar to those of you who've listened to us for a while now. But even if you don't know that term in particular, crucible experience, you know what a crucible experience is very likely, because all of us will go through them in our lifetimes. Many of us have been through them, through more than one of them in our lives up until this point. And crucible experiences are those times in life, those failures, setbacks, traumas, tragedies, those things that feel like they can sort of knock the wind out of us, that they can knock us off course, change the trajectory of our lives. And as we say every week, the good news is that we don't talk about them on Beyond the Crucible as some kind of gather around the campfire and swap war stories or to wallow in them. We talk about them here because we want to get at the hope and healing that can come from learning the lessons of your crucibles and moving beyond them, hence the title of the show. And guiding our conversation, as always, is the founder of Crucible Leadership, the host of Beyond the Crucible, and my friend Warwick Fairfax. Warwick, welcome to this show, which is going to be a good one. We've talked a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and we've got some surprises for listeners, and I've even got some surprises for you. So.
Yeah, very much looking forward to it. Should be a great discussion.
So what we're going to talk about today, listeners, is I don't know, maybe it's a subject that you are a little wary of, and it is the idea of here's the title I've come up with as an organizing construct for what we're doing. Without a team, a vision is just daydreaming. That's kind of what I came up with on the top of my paper right here. That's what I wrote down. Warwick, why is that if it is, I hope it is, why is that a good summary of the importance of teamwork to bringing a vision to reality?
You know, typically to get a vision, to get a dream to happen, you can't do it alone. It's tempting to want to do it alone, but nobody has all the gifts, all the skills, all the experience to make a dream, to make a vision become reality. And so pretty much in almost, in the vast majority of cases, if you don't have a team, your vision, as we say, is dead on arrival. It won't happen. And so that is the cold, hard reality. How much does your vision matter? If it matters to you a lot, rightly or wrongly, from your perspective, you're going to need to consider having a team. It's not really an option in the vast majority of endeavors to not have a team for that team to happen, for that vision to happen.
Now, you use the phrase cold, hard reality. That's not usually used for things that are sunshine and puppy dogs, right? That's normally used, that phrase is normally used for things that can be arduous, that can be difficult, that can involve friction and head butting and those kinds of things. Why did you choose those words? Why are people, especially leaders, why are they loath sometimes to not just embrace a team, but create a team to help them enact their vision?
It's an interesting question. Think about the profile of a typical visionary. They're typically passionate, determined, surrender's not an option. They've got perseverance, but very often they kind of want to do it themselves. They're impatient. When you have a group of people, it can take so long, endless meetings, endless discussions. The team doesn't get it. After all, it's not their vision, it's your vision. And so it's like, visionaries are like, I just want to do it myself. People are just annoying. They just get in the way. I just want to get this thing done. Let's just go. Let's make it happen. People can be a pain in the neck, a drag, it's just get out of the way and let me make it happen. people are the enemy at times. I mean, I'm over dramatizing a bit, but the typical founder, um, just the whole team thing, it can certainly make things longer. It's just, why would I want to do that? Now, sometimes they'll grudgingly do that, but it's kind of kicking and screaming.
Yep.
It's not like, oh joy, I have to have a team, right? It's like, oh joy, I need to go to the dentist. Well, if you need a filling, if you don't go to the dentist, you're going to be in pain. So ultimately, it's like, I may be afraid of dentists, I may not like them, but I'm going to go because what choice do I have? Pain will solve the pain. But you don't go, oh joy, I'm going to the dentist. It's the highlight of my day. So typically, leaders feel about getting a team a bit the way they think of going to the dentist. It's a
Yeah.
necessary evil.
And teams, I mean, here's another thing that sort of undergirds this. Teams are by definition filled with people. People are by definition folks with opinions and views on how to do things. And the larger your team, and by large, I don't even mean 8,000 people. If you've got 5 or 6 people on your team, you're going to have 5 or 6 different opinions about pretty much every aspect of that vision. And I think one of the challenges, one of the roadblocks to creating a team is this idea that, as we go through things, we're going to go 2 steps, forward and 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. We're going to butt heads. We're not going to see eye to eye. We're not going to get along, and we're not going to move the ball down the field, which is an interesting metaphor, because in order to move a ball down a field in a football game, you got to have a team, right? I mean, one person out there, Tom Brady, as we're recording this episode, Tom Brady just won his 7th Super Bowl, but Tom Brady hasn't won a single one of those without a team. So even Tom Brady, we can have a separate podcast on if he's the GOAT or not. Even Tom Brady needs a team to make his vision a reality.
It does, but for all those would-be Tom Brady's, it's like the problem with the team is I'm throwing to a particular route and the receiver's on the wrong route, so it gets intercepted. I mean, what a pain. I was hoping people would block right, but they didn't block right, and I got sacked. So it's like, even people that want to be would-be Tom Brady's, it's like, yeah, what happens? It sounds good in theory, Gary, but I'll get sacked and the receiver will go the wrong route. I'll get intercepted. That's what team means, if one wants to be cynical.
Right.
But you don't want to get sacked or intercepted either.
Right. Before we kind of move on into some of the tips on how to create a team, we should stop and camp out a little bit about what does success look like with a team? I mean, if you can't make a vision a reality without a team, what does it look like with a team? I brought up Tom Brady, and he's won 7 Super Bowls, all with a team. But a couple of quotes that I, sort of pulled together that I thought were extremely interesting. And here's football again, not that I want to camp out here all day, but Vince Lombardi, the legendary football coach of my Green Bay Packers, said this once: individual commitment to a group effort. That is what makes a team work, a company work, a society work, and a civilization work. If you prefer to move out of the sports arena and get into the leadership business space, here's something Andrew Carnegie said: teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision. Exactly what we're talking about. The ability to direct individual accomplishments toward organizational objective. It is the fuel that allows common people to obtain uncommon results.
Absolutely. I mean, those are great quotes. I mean, a great team will be comprised of a diverse set of backgrounds and skills who are as committed, if not more committed, than you are to the mission. It's really a case of 1 and 1 equals 3. That's what a team does. It's greater than the sum of its parts. So picture you have a team that's even more committed than you are to the vision. They're all on the same page. They have a diverse set of skills and things that just go in, like it's autopilot. I mean, there's a beauty of a team when it works well. I mean, I can think of probably my favorite sport to participate in growing up was rowing, or crew, as they say here. And I rowed in eights, obviously, 8 people in a rowing shell. And I remember one time when I was rowing for my college at Oxford, Balliol College, and the boat I was in was probably, they were a little bit more talented, maybe a lot more talented than I was. Um, but when you're rowing with 7 other people and you're rowing in complete unison, the boat is flying to the water, it's steady. Um, it's just a beautiful thing. Obviously, when you're not rowing together and the boat's going side to side, and it can be a little painful. But when you're all rowing in unison, I mean, to me, I often think of rowing as like the ultimate team sport, because if one person's not rowing hard, it makes everybody else's job
Right.
so much tougher. So that's a feeling you never forget when you're in that zone, so to speak, as they say in sports, where everything is in complete harmony and it's just graceful, it's movement, and you're all functioning as one. That's the feeling of a great team.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about this beforehand, but it just popped in my head. One of the things that you write about in your upcoming book, Crucible Leadership, Embrace Your Trials to Lead a Life of Significance, coming this fall from Morgan James Publishing. One of the things you write about, one of the people you write about there, you talk about historical figures and their successes and the things that they learned through their crucibles. And there's one that sticks out to me, and we haven't talked about this, but in advance, but you talk about, with all that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did, you talk about Louis Howe, his one of his advisors. And to me, that's an example of Roosevelt. People think is this like grand, he did it all by himself, and nobody really does anything by themselves. But Louis Howe was very critical to Roosevelt's ability to achieve the successes he achieved in his presidency.
Absolutely. As listeners probably know, in the early 20s, Roosevelt got polio, which is very rare, even back then for an adult. And he was, his legs pretty much were paralyzed. He could move very ungainly with these massive, heavy braces. And it seemed like his political career was finished. This was an era where if you had polio, it was sort of like a life death sentence. You were meant to just sit at home and while the rest of your years away. Somehow it was a shameful thing, even though clearly it's not your fault. But with the help of his wife, Eleanor, and Louis Howe, they kind of helped him realize, you know what, life's not over. Louis Howe helped Eleanor go around the state of New York speaking, and she was more of a introverted, shy person, but very determined woman. She kept his name in the in political, press circles. And, Louis Howe was just a master behind the scenes campaign director, and really helped Franklin Roosevelt become governor of New York and then ultimately president. But yeah, he had an amazing team that Louis Howe and Franklin's wife, Eleanor, that really believed in him and his mission. Certainly without Eleanor, but without both of them, nobody would really have heard of Franklin Roosevelt, other than somebody that was on the ticket of a Democratic candidate that lost in the early 20s.
Right.
But he wouldn't have become president.
And it goes back to what I said is the organizing construct for this conversation. Without a team of visions, just a daydream. Without those folks that you've just talked about, his wife and Louis Howe, Franklin Roosevelt, it was a daydream. Maybe he wanted to be president. Maybe he wanted to rise to, but he could not have made it happen. And I think it's safe to say, right? Any person that we could think of who's achieved greatness has a team underneath them.
Absolutely.
That is, there are very few mavericks who don't have at least some people behind them who are helping them along the way.
That's so true.
So you've put together in a recent blog some tips, some guidelines for people, for leaders to navigate how to create a team. One of the ways, it seems to me, to avoid some of those conflicts we talked about early on, and you just hinted at it a little bit, one of the ways to avoid those conflicts is to get the right people on the bus, as Jim Collins would say. You want the right people on the bus in the right seats. And there are ways that you can go about compiling a team that can both help your vision become reality and also help you from going crazy in the process, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some key things you need to look for in a team. But I think, as you're doing that, the first thing you need to do is really change your attitude. You need to, and we've talked about this a little bit in our discussion here, but you need to stop the whining, stop the complaining, or as we say in Australia, stop the whinging, which is like whining squared. It's worse than whining.
Okay.
Whinge it. No whinging. It's like, okay, I know it's going to take longer. You're going to have to talk about the vision a gazillion times, and they're not going to get it initially. So you're going to have to talk about it more and engage them. And we'll talk a bit about how you do that in a moment. But yeah, it's going to be a pain in the neck and it's going to be difficult. But ultimately, it's worth it because there's a difference between succeeding and failing. And if you really care about your vision, then you know what? You just got to suck it up and do what it takes to get the right people and get them all engaged. So really, before you start hiring people, change your attitude. Okay, quit whining, quit whinging, quit complaining, and realizing this is going to make your vision succeed. So if there's one thing that you should never remember as you're doing this, is your vision important or not? Do you want your dream to succeed or fail? It's a binary choice. It's yes or no.
Right.
If your vision is that important, suck it up, change your attitude, and get your head in the game, so to speak, and realize you need a team. So that's the first thing, change your attitude.
And is there a little bit of maybe in some cases ego that pops into this? The reason for not wanting to have a team, right? I used the word maverick a little while ago. Is there sort of this maverick, go it alone, independent, do it myself? I don't need anybody. Can ego play in there? And is that part of what you have to suppress and change in your attitude?
Yeah, I mean, very insightful point. Absolutely. You've got to realize you're going to have to share the credit. But after all, is it about the vision or is it about your ego?
Yeah.
And you pretty much have to choose. If it's about your ego, then give up the vision because the chance of it succeeding, it's not impossible, but it's pretty low. So check your ego at the door, learn a bit of humility and say, look, if this vision's so important, I just need to have a bit of humility and realize I might need to hire some great people, some of whom might be better, quicker, faster, smarter than I am. But what's wrong with that if it helped you accomplish the vision?
Right.
The only reason it's wrong is if you've got a fragile ego. Well, if you've got a fragile ego, then get a stronger ego, and if you can't do that, give up and don't try and accomplish the vision,
Right.
Do
some ego push-ups.
Exactly.
And that will help build your ego muscle, not in the way that we tend to think of it, which is an overactive ego, but to have a more elastic ego, one that can bring other people into the team, into the vision. And that leads logically, Warwick, to your second point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is where you could read 10 different leadership books and they will say this point, but it's very rarely done. So it's not always you have in management something in which all leadership and management experts agree, which typically doesn't get done, which doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. There are a lot of things in life in which experts disagree, not this one. And that's what this is. And that's basically, you hire for, character and attitude and alignment to the mission first, skills second. So basically, if you had to boil it down to its most critical, character first, skills second. Now, typically what happens is let's hire the person with the most experience and, Ivy League degrees. And look, there's nothing wrong with Ivy League. I mean, I did my undergrad, as listeners know, at Oxford and got my MBA from Harvard Business School. So I'm not against education. But just because you went to the so-called right schools, and even if you have experience, which is obviously helpful, it's character that's the most important thing. And so people might say, well, what do you mean by character? And so what I mean by that is, part of it is what Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great Level 5 Leaders. Yes, you want people that are driven and determined, but you want people who are humble. Back again to the ego. You don't want to have, you might have to check your ego at the door, Well, your team does too, because you cannot get on with a team if everybody wants to be the prima donna and, you know, have the lights shine on them all the time. So you want them to be driven, but they need to be humble. They need to be team players. They need to want to learn from others. Um, if they say they're going to get something done, they will get that. They will get it done. There are certain key characteristics that you want. And here's the thing is, some people talk about hire for character or hire for attitude, train for skills. Why do people say that? Because skills, at least if you have some degree of a natural ability or some degree of aptitude, like if you are good with numbers and are detail orientated, if you train somebody in accounting, they can usually get it. I mean, you can't, I'm not talking about training somebody that hates math and it's not detail orientated. That's probably not a good use of time. But assuming there's some degree of natural aptitude, let's assume there's some degree of training, rather than hire the best accountant or the best, or the salesperson who, maybe has this great degree. Who are the people that you feel like have the right aptitude, the right character? That's really the most important thing. And it flies in the face of what people do. Why? Because if you're an HR manager or a line manager, and you say, okay, who did you hire? Well, I hired somebody with 20 years experience at GE or X big company. The undergrad was at Cornell or Dartmouth or somewhere. Okay, great. And so some other person might say, well, I didn't hire that person. I hired somebody with 5 years experience at a smaller company, and they went to a state school in Nebraska.
Right.
If that doesn't work out, what happens? You passed up the Ivy League person with, 15 years of experience at GE for somebody at a smaller company that went to some small college in Nebraska? Really? That's the problem. You see, well, if it doesn't work out, it's like, well, look at the pedigree. How can you? So people are risk averse. And how in the world do you measure character? I mean, I described it, but it's not quantifiable. Therefore, it feels risky, and people
Right.
hate risk.
Right.
So that's why people might say, I hear what you're saying, but,
Yeah.
that's the problem.
And there's I found an article speaking of Ivy League schools and speaking of Harvard, the Harvard Business Review wrote an article a few years back on 8 ways to build collaborative teams. And among the 8 factors that they listed that lead to success go right to the point that you're just talking about. Their 4th point was uh, ensuring the requisite skills for the team to be successful. And here's what they wrote. The folks who wrote this article: human resources department that teach employees how to build relationships, how to communicate well, and how to resolve conflicts creatively can have a major impact on team collaboration. So there you've got HR departments who aren't looking at the location or the pedigree of the university or the education as much as what are those quote unquote softer skills, those relational skills, those being able to kind of work together skills. People who can find that is a huge determiner in how successful a team will be.
It is. And, it reminds me of Daniel Goleman's work in emotional intelligence that's gained a lot of notoriety the last 10, 15 years or more. And he talks about these softer skills like the ability to persuade, but the ability to listen, to empathize.
Mm-hmm.
Those are critical components. When you have people on your team that want to listen, and they want to compromise in a good sense. They want to find, okay, where's the win-win in this with other team members? They can empathize with others. It's extremely hard to teach those sorts of skills. You either wired that way or it's linked to your innermost values. People's innermost values and wiring tend not to change. Try to train people for values. It's not impossible, but training people for skills is infinitely easier than values and inherent wiring. So I think more and more people realize it's important. What it really comes down to is you got to have some guts, some courage to
Yeah.
do what you know is right. Um, and take some risks in hiring people that may have a little less pedigree, a little less experience. They have the raw talent, but but more than the talent, they have the character, the attitude. You know, it's funny. Pause for a second.
Okay. Note to producers, cut this part out.
It's funny. I came across this in the paper today. Speaking of
Okay.
Tom Brady, okay? I'm
Okay.
sure you're familiar with this. So here's his scouting report, his NFL draft evaluation about Tom Brady. Poor build, skinny, lacks great physical stature and arm strength, lacks mobility and the ability to avoid the rush, lacks a really strong arm, can't drive the ball downfield, does not throw a really tight spiral, system type play who can get exposed if forced to ad lib, gets knocked down easily. That's
Yeah.
the scouting report. I think from memory, I think he went in the fifth round or something. So
Yeah, 5th or 6th round. Yeah.
so if you look at that, it's like, well, okay, case closed. But what's this missing? Some of that's true. I don't think he's the most mobile quarterback in the world. But what's that missing? It's missing his heart, his character, his work ethic, you know, his ability to learn, to grow. I mean, the way he keeps himself fit physically and nutrition is off the charts. He's what,
Yeah.
43 or
Yeah,
something?
he's 43, right.
So, you know, why would you hire Tom Brady? Well, not based on the scouting report, right? You would never draft a guy based on this. And it's not all wrong what this is saying. You know, it just
Right.
misses stuff. It misses his heart and his determination. And that's why he's as great as he is. So, you know, do you want to be the one that misses a potential Tom Brady on your team because of some superficial evaluation that misses the heart?
Right.
No.
Right. And yet it is true. And I think the third point that you bring out in your blog about the importance of teams and how to construct them, it is true that you do need people who have, as you put it, a diverse set of skills. Skills are important. You can't ignore them. So what's the key about finding a diverse set of skills in the folks you put on your team?
Well, first of all, you got to recognize that you need it. I know it may sound obvious, you know, if you're in a organization, yes, you know, you're going to need engineers, manufacturing types, research and development, marketing and sales, finance. You're going to need a broad range of skills. But sometimes what happens is, you know, if you're a can-do person that wants to get something done yesterday, some of these people are going to be like chains. You're going to have accountants saying, well, I don't know, I'm not sure about the cost analysis here. It's looking a little dubious. You know, you'll have, you know, marketing and sales saying, I'm not sure if the market really wants that product. You know, I'm not, you know, the engineers, it's like, I'm not sure we can design a product that, you know, will actually function properly, certainly not at a cost-effective price. So it sounds good, but inevitably, depending on your personality, typically people with diverse skills have diverse personalities. You know, the type of personality required to be in marketing, sales, and in accounting or engineering is radically different in almost all cases. So you first got to realize, yeah, some of these people are going to be annoying to you, but they're doing their job.
Right.
Let them do their job, even if it's like, oh my gosh, here we go, wait, because, you know, the engineering folks saying, I don't think we're quite ready yet. Sometimes they'll be overly cautious, but sometimes it's like, you know what, maybe it's not ready. If you're building a car, do you want the wheels to fall off? If the engineering saying, yeah, I have one of those parts seem a little brittle, the tests don't look good. Well, maybe you might want to. Well, I mean, can you imagine if you're flying an airline? You're not going to ignore the safety folks saying, "Yeah, I'm a little worried about that engine." You know, it's causing some problems more often than it needs to. So, I think part of it is recognizing you will need a diverse set of skills, and the other thing comes back to humility. You're going to find people on your team because they have skills that you don't, that in their area, you might feel like, boy, I'm a moron. I'm an idiot compared to them in their area. And that's okay. You know, you cannot be the expert at everything. Park your ego at the door, assemble team who know more than you do in their area. Because collectively, the sum of all those wonderful people will be a set of skills and capabilities that will be mind-blowing. So it sounds obvious, but people don't tend to like to hire the best and the brightest in their areas, in part because of ego and in part because their personalities will be different, and you will get annoyed, you will get frustrated. Inevitably, you know you're going to get frustrated at certain people with different skill sets. You know you need them, but it's going to be
Right.
frustrating, you know?
Yep. And for listeners who are also viewers who are watching this on YouTube, you may notice on my sport coat, I am wearing 6 lapel pins. And to Warwick's point about a variety of skills, and they can be annoying, and sometimes there can be headbutts. These are 6 lapel pins of the Avengers. You've got Captain America, Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, the Hulk, and Black Panther. You got strength, you got speed, you got stealth, you got smarts, you've got all these different things going on, and the unit, the Avengers, is greater than each individual member. But boy, if you've seen the movies and read the comic books, they can fight. They end up saving the Earth, but they get bruised themselves from themselves sometimes in getting there, and that is true sometimes of many teams in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, they needle each other. I mean, well, I don't know if it was Avengers, but wasn't there a superhero movie where they had like a civil war or something between them?
That was the Avengers, Captain America and Iron Man, who are at the top of my lapel pins right here.
Yeah, on opposite sides of your sport coat, funnily enough. So
right. I planned that. Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. So, you know, you don't want to be like that movie. You want to realize, okay, come on, we don't need to have a war. We're on the same team. We have different strengths, but let's harmonize here.
And do you have, in your experience work, do you have an example of how what you've been talking about here for the last few minutes plays out? Do you have an example, be it personal or historical, that you could point to that can help listeners sort of understand in real time, real terms, how this way of compiling a team works?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are ones in history. You think of Abraham Lincoln. He had a team of rivals who were. It was so-called a team of rivals because they were his opponents for the Republican presidential nomination, and they each thought that the better man hadn't won. So initially they didn't respect him, but because he felt like they were the best people for the job, he assembled a very diverse group of people who were on his cabinet. So committed was he to the team that I remember one of them, Samuel Chase, I believe, was Treasury Secretary. And the guy was really good Treasury Secretary, but the guy had a massive ego. And he just did whatever he could to undermine Lincoln. Eventually, he went kind of one step too far. He kept submitting his resignation as some political ploy to try to get more power. And eventually, reluctantly, Lincoln accepted it. But then what he ends up doing is nominating him to be Chief Justice at the Supreme Court. And this is a guy that is level best to undermine Lincoln. But Lincoln said, he is the right person for the job. And so that was sort of remarkable, but it wasn't easy. But he assembled a diverse group of people, irrespective of the opinion that they had of him, because, the country and in the throes of civil war at the time he assembled them, probably about to go to war, he needed the best people, whether they liked him or not. So that's really taking team and putting your own personal agenda aside to the ultimate level.
Yeah, and that is, again, one of those situations where if he had not done that, what we think of Abraham Lincoln, the greatness we see in Abraham Lincoln, those are sort of behind the curtain greatness things that we don't tend to think about. That's why the book Team of Rivals is so interesting, because it opens the gates on those things that we don't hear about all the time in the history books or in the movies, where they sort of have movies are all about the hero, right? And going back a few podcasts ago, the idea of heroic leadership tends not to work. as we discovered with our guest, Joe Badaracco, heroic leadership tends not to work. And in fact, this kind of communal team leadership is the way that things get done that last. I think that's a safe thing
Absolutely.
to
And
say.
if you want to read one single book about a historical figure and how they were able to assemble a team, it's Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's written as a historical book, but it's a great book, but there's a lot of lessons for leaders. And, what's the payoff? After he died, these people that were his rivals were just, that not only were they in tears, but they were praising him as the greatest leader they probably had ever
Right.
known.
Right.
I mean, that was, how do you turn people that disrespect you, think you're this country bumpkin from Illinois, which was way out in the middle of nowhere in 1860, to this